country. But doesn't he not see that that makes him unfit to interpret the intelligence? That job has to be given to someone with the independence, like a judge.
He's made no case at all to explain why he comes here seeking greater powers than any Home Secretary in modern times has had over British citizens, and greater powers than were ever sought by his predecessor, his government, or any other government in modern times.
But the surprise is the suspected terrorists in Belmarsh prison, judged so dangerous that they've been held for more than 3 years without trial, won't be held under house arrest. Security services say at the moment nobody needs to be deprived of their liberty in that way. This whole business has come about because the law lords say the men's detention is illegal, and when they're released they'll be candidates for control orders. They could include restrictions on a terrorist suspect's movement, where he lives, who he meets, where he's allowed to go. A suspect might have to allow his home to be searched, agree to be tagged, and to surrender his passport.
I've been advised by the police and security authorities that they consider that the control orders which will be established by this legislation are currently sufficient to deal with the individuals concerned, and that deprivation of liberty, though valuable, is not strictly required in the language of the Convention.
International terrorism is nothing new. Today the descendants of both the gunpowder plotters and the government 400 years ago shook hands in Westminster Hall. In the House, less reconciliation. Tonight the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives have combined forces to put down an amendment calling the proposed laws excessive and wrong.
And Mark's in the central lobby in Parliament tonight. Mark, what do you make of one of the points you brought up there, that these Belmarsh suspects will not be affected by these proposed new laws?
Well, it certainly suggests that either the government was too harsh in the past, excuse me, or is going to be too lax in the future. And the view of Charles Clarke, the current Home Secretary, is pretty straightforward. He thinks that detention without trial was too blunt an instrument, too black and white. It was either lock them up or let them go. And he thinks he's come up with a more sophisticated package. But that does beg the question why nobody in the government in all those 3 years spotted that, and it took the law lords to point it out to them.
Listening to the debate in the House and outside the House, it's quite clear that this is becoming not just heated, it's becoming pretty unpleasant.
It is very, very nasty, actually. The Conservatives at the highest level have told me that they believe this is all deliberate political trickery by the government. They think that they're going to be trapped into a position where they've got no choice but to vote against this legislation. It may well fall when it goes to the House of Lords, and then the government, the Labour Party, will have an ideal opportunity at the election to say the Tories are either soft on terrorism or jumping on a bandwagon opportunistically. Equally, the Home Secretary regards the Michael Howard as being crazy in his opposition to this. He says that what he's written about it is astounding, and that he's either naive or misleading, and then he adds he doesn't think he's being naive. So yes, it's getting nasty.
Mark, thank you very much. The threat of a biological terrorist attack is very real, according to the head of Interpol, the international police organisation. Ronald Noble told the BBC that officials had not exaggerated the threat. He said the alarm was continuing to ring. He was talking to our home editor, Mark Easton, who reports now from Lyon.
It's just over a year since anti-terrorist police arrested a family of Algerians in this poor neighbourhood of Lyon in southern France. Investigators said they'd destroyed an Al-Qaeda cell manufacturing biological weapons, botulism and other poisons. No toxins were ever found. But across the city at the headquarters of Interpol, the arrests fueled concern that the world has not taken the threat from bioterrorism seriously enough. The Secretary-General of Interpol, Ronald Noble, is so worried at the lack of preparedness that he's spending $1 million wooing police chiefs and health experts to Lyon next week.
When you talk about bioterrorism, that's one crime that we can't try to solve after it happens because the harm will be too great. How could we ever forgive ourselves if millions or hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people were killed simply because our priorities didn't include bioterrorism?
In Britain, a recent exercise focused on a biological or chemical incident on the London Underground. MI5 has publicly warned that such an attack on a Western city is only a matter of time. A prediction that's led the UK to purchase vast stocks of smallpox vaccine. According to Interpol, though, no one can be complacent.
Anyone who's honest about this has to admit that if Al-Qaeda launches a spectacular biological attack, which could cause contagious disease to be spread, that no entity in the world is prepared for it. Not the US, not Europe, not Asia, not Africa. We're not prepared for it.
There are those who say that the whole threat from al-Qaeda is being overplayed deliberately by authoritarian politicians.
The terrorist threat is as real today as it was in 2001 when September 11th occurred. None of us can let our guards down and assume that the problem has been addressed.
There is deep frustration here at Interpol headquarters. The threat from biological attack is not being taken seriously enough, but also that police around the world remain reluctant to share intelligence that could prevent a catastrophic attack. But Interpol remains convinced that al-Qaeda sleeper cells are waiting and plotting a spectacular series of bioterror attacks on the West. Mark Easton, BBC News, Lyon.
President Bush has welcomed a commitment from every NATO country to help pay for the training of the new Iraqi army. The President attended a NATO summit in Brussels before meeting European Union officials, as Stephen Sackler now reports.
The stars and stripes raised at EU headquarters, every effort being made to display transatlantic unity. Today's leg of the Bush charm campaign began at NATO. The alliance was badly divided by the Iraq war, but American lobbying has produced a commitment to a NATO training mission in Iraq.
26 nations sitting around that table said it's important for NATO to be involved in Iraq. It's a strong statement.
The president left NATO, claiming another transatlantic institution back on track. In truth, though, the NATO commitment to Iraq is tiny, and many members are contributing virtually nothing. The anti-Bush crowds were out again, but kept far away from the man himself.
The American president might like to believe that he's winning over all but these die-hard critics, but actually it's not quite as simple as that. For all of the smiles on show, the leaders of France and Germany don't entirely share his vision of the transatlantic alliance.
Today, Jacques Chirac lent his support to a German call for a strategic reassessment. The implication, more of a security role for the EU, less for a US-dominated NATO. He also said the EU plans to lift its arms embargo on China, something the Americans oppose. Mr. Bush, of course, came here looking for friends, not a fight. He tried very hard to avoid controversy. But when it was suggested he was being bellicose towards Iran, it hit a nerve.
This notion that the United States is getting ready to attack Iran is simply ridiculous. Having said that, all options are on the table.
It's not clear what Europe, still less the Iranians, will make of that. And as Mr. Bush headed to his bed tonight, he may have reflected that transatlantic differences are not so easily bridged. Stephen Sacker, BBC News, Brussels.
Iraq's main Shia alliance has nominated the Vice President, Ibrahim al-Jafari, as its candidate for Prime Minister. It means that Dr. Jafari is almost certain to be confirmed because his closest rival, Ahmad Chalabi, has already pulled out of the race. Sinn Féin is facing financial penalties of up to £500,000, including the suspension of grants and expenses paid to Sinn Féin representatives at Stormont and Westminster. The Northern Ireland Secretary, Paul Murphy, outlined the sanctions as punishment for the massive bank raid in Belfast last December, a raid that's been blamed on the IRA. Sinn Féin said the penalties were a distortion of democracy.
Exactly £26.5 million were stolen from the Northern Bank in Belfast just before Christmas. The political cost of the raid is more difficult to quantify. Once the police blamed the IRA for the robbery, there were always likely to be penalties for Sinn Féin. Today they came, a series of financial sanctions, with Sinn Féin forced to pay for the actions of the IRA.
Ongoing paramilitary activity, sectarian violence and criminality masquerading as a political cause are all corrosive of the trust and the confidence that are necessary to sustain a durable political process.
It seems Sinn Féin's 4 MPs will be allowed to keep their offices at Westminster, but they're set to lose their expenses and allowances. Overall, the sanctions could end up costing the party more than £500,000.
Well, let's be clear about this. Paul Murphy doesn't have a single vote in Ireland, any part of Ireland. He doesn't have the right to discriminate against our voters. I think this action is anti-democratic, and it's again an act of discrimination against the people who vote for Sinn Féin, and it's more of the same.
At recent Republican rallies, Sinn Féin leaders have made it clear they're totally against criminality, and they say the IRA is too. But the author of a book about the IRA says Republicans may be playing word games.
There are some aspects of what Republican paramilitaries have done, which most people who are not in the Republican movement would consider to be criminal, but which Republicans would see as being part of their struggle, which would be supportive of their struggle. So some aspects of money acquisition, some aspects of intimidation, which most people in Northern Ireland and elsewhere would see as sheer criminality or gangsterism, are interpreted by Republicans on occasions as being political.
2 months after this bank was robbed, the political impact is still being felt. Sinn Féin leaders were punished today, but it could have been worse. In spite of all that's happened, the government is not yet ready to move ahead without them. Mark Simpson, BBC News, Belfast.
More than 400 people have died in a powerful earthquake in southern Iran. It measured 6.4 on the Richter scale and struck early this morning not far from the city of Bam, which was devastated by a quake just over a year ago. The worst hit area was around the town of Zarand in the southeastern province of Kerman. Ben Brown reports.
In Iran today, unbearable grief. For the second time in 2 years, the south of this country has incurred the wrath of nature. The earthquake laid waste to a string of villages. Homes made of mud collapsed within seconds. It happened at 5 to 6 in the morning, when many were fast asleep. Others had got up before dawn to go and pray at their local mosque. It was where they died. Aid workers driving into the area were shocked by what they saw.
The devastation when we arrived was total in this particular village, which is the epicenter of the earthquake. And also 2 more villages next to this are completely wiped out, and many dead people were taken out of the rubble while we were there.
While they are busy collecting corpses, at the same time they're also frantically digging for survivors, people who may still be trapped in the rubble of their homes. So far the death toll here has been hundreds rather than thousands, and that's because this is a sparsely populated area. But even so, whole families have been destroyed. 25 of my relatives have been killed, says Amir. When we got here, everyone was dead. Iran is especially vulnerable to earthquakes because it's surrounded by major fault lines, making it one of the most quake-prone countries in the world. The epicenter today was about 100 miles northwest of Bam, where another quake on Boxing Day in 2003 killed 30,000 people. Tonight, the hospitals are overwhelmed with casualties. The authorities appealing for extra supplies of medicines and syringes. While outside in the cold and the rain, the desperate search for survivors goes on. Ben Brown, BBC News.
Ken Livingstone has again refused to apologise for comparing a Jewish journalist to a concentration camp guard. Speaking at his weekly press conference, the Mayor of London told the Jewish community that he had not meant to offend them, but he said the reporter who felt insulted was in the wrong job if he couldn't cope with such a remark. Another 7 food products containing the illegal dye Sudan 1 have been recalled. More than 400 items have already been withdrawn from sale, and the BBC has obtained a list of nearly 200 organisations, including pubs and caterers for schools and hospitals, who may have been supplied with food which was contaminated.
Hunting down the road products. The list of foods contaminated with the Sudan 1 dye has grown again. For small shopkeepers, it's been a struggle to keep track of what's on the danger list.
The point about the independent trade is that many of them don't have direct access to the internet, even in these days. So many of them, since the letter went out, have been phoning in. We've been faxing lists to them. We've been posting lists to them to make sure that they can be as up-to-date as possible.
The BBC has obtained a list of more than 180 organisations which received the contaminated product. It includes restaurant suppliers, a chain of pubs, companies which supply schools and hospitals, along with the major brands and supermarkets which have already withdrawn products. Now, questions are being asked about just why the Sudan 1 dye in the chilli powder, which ended up in the Worcester sauce, wasn't spotted earlier. Testing companies like this one in Surrey are now helping the food industry to keep the contaminant out of Britain. Since July 2003, any chili powder arriving in the EU from India has to be tested and certified free of Sudan 1. And according to food scientists, the red dye isn't that difficult to spot. But the chili powder which caused the problem was supplied by this Essex firm back in 2002, before the ban and the tests came in. The best-known maker of Worcestershire sauce says it's been caught in the crossfire in this food scare. Leon Perrins carries out regular tests on the chili essence used in its sauce to make sure it's free of the illegal dye, but it's still having to reassure customers.
What consumers want to know is Leon Perrins affected and is it safe? And we can categorically say Leon Perrins is not affected and it is totally safe.
By Thursday, the Food Standards Agency aims to get all affected products off the shelves. Restoring public confidence may take longer. Rory Catherine-Jones, BBC News.
Now here with news of tonight's action in the Champions League is Hazel. Hey.
Thanks, Hugh. Good evening to you. Yes, once again, Arsenal have had a bruising night in the Champions League with a 3-1 defeat in Germany by Bayern Munich. The Gunners will now have to produce something very special indeed in the return leg at Highbury if they're to progress beyond the last 16 of the competition. Kevin Geary reports.
Frozen out in Munich. Not a single England player in either starting lineup. Not even Bayern's Canadian-born Owen Hargreaves. Still nationalities but negligence at the back undid all their ambition as Pizarro claimed his second unopposed. What had become a mountain to climb had a glass.
But it was a much better night for Liverpool at Anfield as they won 3-1 against Bayer Leverkusen, the German side which tripped them up 3 years ago. Edgy Kopp was denied the reassuring presence of the suspended Steven Gerrard. Instead, the off-maligned Igor Bistian provided the assured touch in midfield, threading through for Luis Garcia, the Spaniard's first in Europe for Liverpool after a quarter of an hour. And before half-time, the Reds' tension levels had eased even further. John Arne Risa's free kick squeezing in at the left-hand post for his debut goal in the competition. And a quarter-final berth looked there for the taking. Appropriately a German, Didi Hamann, apparently sending his compatriots home at the end of an awful away day. But Leverkusen will take one valuable souvenir home. In injury time, a precious away goal. There could yet be a twist in the tie. And finally, in the Premiership tonight, West Brom and Southampton drew 0-0 at the Hawthorns. That's it.
Thank you very much, Hazel. Just a quick reminder, if you're watching on digital satellite, Freeview or cable, there's more on 10 o'clock's News Extra, including an extended version of the interview with the head of Interpol on the threat from Al-Qaeda. We'll be back a little later. Time now to join our news teams across the UK. Bye for now.
Hello, good evening. I'm Pauline Brandt with news for the South. A small piece of land is causing a major stir on a local and national level. On one side of the debate are travellers and on the other, local residents. The plot near Pangbourne in West Berkshire was bought last summer. It was then sold to a group of travellers. They moved in with their caravans and then applied for retrospective planning permission for a permanent site. That was rejected. Today, their appeal was heard at an inquiry in Newbury. Roger Finn has been following the case.
It was May last year when this site was sold as grazing land to a Mr. Jonathan Harvey. He divided it up into 16 plots and sold it to 16 families. Only one of them is in residence at the moment. Those families immediately put down hard standing and applied for retrospective planning permission. That was refused. Today, the appeal against that refusal was heard at West Berkshire Council. Gathered there were residents who lived near the site, local councillors, the MP for the area, Martin Salter, all arguing that it was right to refuse planning permission. The one group that wasn't there were the travellers themselves, nor did they have any legal representation. So instead of the inquiry lasting for the planned 4 days, it was all over in 4 hours. So the arguments, as you'd expect, were completely one-sided. People were saying that this is an inappropriate place for a traveller's site, that it goes against existing planning policy, and that this is, after all, an area of outstanding natural beauty. Now, the interesting thing about this case is that it's going to be decided personally by the Secretary of State, John Prescott. The appeal inquiry today was simply an exercise in gathering all the evidence, and we're not sure quite when he'll make the final judgment. This is Roger Finn for BBC South Today at Pangbourne.
The issues raised by the Pangbourne site are similar to a case in Chobham in Surrey. There, a group of gypsies moved onto greenbelt land, which they bought. They too set up home and were then turned down for planning permission. That was 2 years ago. Now the gypsies and the local council are involved in an extensive legal battle. They're also having an inquiry into the refusal of planning permission, which is due this week. Bryony Leyland has more.
With 6 children to look after on her own, Bitty Price doesn't have much time to reflect on the future. But she is worried she'll lose her home.
It's very important for me to live here because I've got my kids in school and I've got water and I've got everything I need here, you see. If they move me on from here, I've got nowhere to go because I'm all on my own.
There are 26 plots on this site near Chobham. The gypsy families bought the land but have been refused planning permission and are now appealing. The council says this greenbelt site in a floodplain is entirely unsuitable for homes. Local residents like Tina Doble, whose garden borders the site, agree.
It must be one of the worst sites they could have chosen, and the floodplain issue is affecting so many people. It's just unfair.
The planning inquiry is due to finish tomorrow, but it'll be several months before a decision about the site and its residents is announced. Bryony Leyland, BBC South Today.
Molam, the builders of Portsmouth Spinnaker Tower, are asking for more money. The leader of the council, Gerald Vernon Jackson, says an undisclosed and substantial sum is needed to help finish the attraction by the end of May or early June. He's recommending that the City Council rejects the demand at a meeting tonight to set an annual budget. A man who dressed up as Spider-Man and climbed the London Eye, closing it for a whole day, has walked free from court. Fathers for Justice campaigner David Chick from West Sussex was cleared by a jury of causing a public nuisance. He told the court in London that he spent 18 hours on top of the tourist attraction because at the time he hadn't seen his daughter for over a year and a half. The former world champion boxer Chris Eubank has been defending his behaviour after he was arrested for taking a vehicle. Eubank moved a lorry which he claims was blocking traffic during the rush hour in Brighton yesterday. He says what he did might have been illegal, but it was morally correct. Natalie Graham reports.
The sight of Chris Eubank at the wheel of his heavyweight car is a familiar one in Brighton city centre. Yesterday he was taking his children to school when he got stuck behind a lorry unloading beer outside a pub. He says he asked one of the draymen to move, but he refused.
I said, if you don't, then I will. He said, well, go on, then calling my bluff. Wrong person to say that to. I climbed up, in, he put his hand on my hand, and I said, don't let me get down, please. And he took his hand off, and I drove 100 metres down the road, put it on the left-hand side.
Chris handed himself into the police and was arrested for aggravated taking and driving away the delivery truck.
I spent 3.5 hours in a police station, and I would do it again. As members of the community, we have a duty to actually protect one another and police our community, and it needed to be done yesterday.
After his arrest, Chris Eubank was released without charge, but Scottish Carrish Brewery are angry about what happened. They say their draymen were only doing their job and Mr. Eubank's actions were extremely irresponsible.
As far as most people are concerned, this boxer saved the day. He says he'll pay for any damage to the lorry, but otherwise he's unrepentant. The police are still investigating the episode, but for now, Chris Eubank is free and back on the streets. Natalie Graham, BBC South Today, Brighton.
On to football, and 3 of our teams have been in action tonight. In the Premiership, Southampton were away, playing a crucial match against West Brom. The result, a 0-0 draw. In the Championship, Reading played Crewe, a 1-1 draw there. In League One, Bournemouth took on Torquay at home, winning 3-0. The weather tonight, further snow showers giving a covering, but more significant accumulations possible in the east. It'll be icy with a low of -2 Celsius. Tomorrow, some sunny intervals, further wintry showers, especially in the east, a high of 4 Celsius. And that's all from us for now. Time to go back to Hugh Edwards in London.
The main news tonight, the Queen has decided not to attend the marriage of Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles. Buckingham Palace said that Her Majesty would attend the church blessing, which follows the civil ceremony, and pay for the reception. And The Home Secretary has confirmed that he wants new powers to restrict the movement of terrorist suspects and in some cases to use house arrest. Newsnight is getting underway on BBC Two, but from all of us here on the 10 o'clock team, good night.
Recently, Tony Blair very publicly apologised to those people who were wrongly imprisoned for IRA bombings on the British mainland in the early 70s. Jerry Conlon spent 15 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and 15 years on, he's finally won an apology. He talks to John Sopel for Hard Talk at 11:30 tonight, over on BBC News 24.
Good evening. The east wind, as we have at the moment, often brings the UK some of its most significant snow. And that's how things are shaping up in the next 48 hours. In fact, it's already snowing out in many eastern parts of Scotland, as you can see, across northern England. And the snow showers are really starting to take shape across East Anglia and the southeast. In fact, here, they'll start to take shape even in the Greater London region by the end of the night. So it is the eastern half of the UK most prone to significant snow, both tonight and through the course of tomorrow. Perhaps as much as 5 to 10 centimetres across the Grampians, but also as far south as the Downs, and a good dusting of snow, a couple of centimetres even at lower levels. But a few of the snow showers are getting further west. It's not altogether dry here, but I think the biggest problem further west will be the ice. But obviously where we've got the ice and the snow combined, pretty treacherous overnight for many parts of East England and eastern Scotland, some quite dangerous conditions on the roads. But the frost is widespread, so wherever you've had any showers, it's a colder night than last. It will freeze. There'll be ice around both on the roads and underfoot, particularly untreated roads. But the snow showers just keep coming tomorrow, and because they're more likely to settle tonight, they're more likely to last tomorrow. Again, we're going to have a lack of sunshine, I think, compared with today, so the snow unlikely to melt quite so quickly. And again, as you can see, it's eastern areas most likely to see those snow showers on and off throughout the day, and some pretty beefy showers at that. So it's the west of Scotland, along with the west of Northern Ireland, where we'll see the best of the dry and bright weather. But even here, there'll be more cloud than we had today and a few more showers. And for all of us, it's going to be cold. I think it will feel colder tomorrow, particularly across northern and central England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Perhaps just 2 on the thermometer in Glasgow with a lack of sunshine and that stronger easterly wind. It will have a significant wind chill effect. So a colder day, still a windy day, and that wind still with us into Thursday, piling in off the North Sea and from the cold continent, gradually easing later in the week, but not before it brings more problems. On Thursday, this particular area of low pressure, as you can see here, will enhance the snow again, and this time push it further west. So for the next 24 hours, the main risk of snow is across the eastern side of the country, not exclusively, but mainly. By Thursday, the risk extends further west, perhaps where we haven't seen much snowfall so far in this cold spell. It will start in the east and be heaviest in the east, but through the day it will gradually migrate its way across the rest of England and Wales.